Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Critters, a new binge. So, I kind of went into the first two Critters movies, and then I just decided, you know what? How about I just get to the newest, latest, freshest Critters attempt? Uh, and that just so happens to be Critters, a new binge. Eventually, I will go back into the movies, especially if people want me to review any of that. So before I actually get into actually talking about the show and how I felt about it, if you want to go out of your way to say that you've seen this show, more than likely you could probably do one of two things, or three things. One, you could probably just find the season maybe in a box set somewhere, buy that, but to just support the franchise or support Critters. But there are two apps that I can suggest for you to be able to watch Critters, a new binge, for absolutely free. And that is to be in an app called C Movies, letter C and Movies. And then there's also an app called Fox HD Movies, which is to have the logo but not the title. I think the title is Play 1080p Movies. But yes, you can actually see Critters and you can see it for free, because especially if you're just wanting to support the franchise and stuff like that by going and eventually seeing everything that happened from this. So Critters, a new binge. What would I overall say about this show? Because some people might just be reinterested in this franchise, buy the box set and whatever, but to each their own. Go ahead and do it. So, Critters, a new binge. How do I feel about the show? So, I would say, one, it tries to go back to its traditional stomping grounds with doing some attacks that seem familiar. Honestly, you could kind of tell that this show has a small budget, but it also kind of makes up with it with special effects. And the only problem that I probably have with the show is the alien dialogue that you kind of have to suffer through the pilot episode, where it's just a lot of through the a lot of the beginning of this, and then there's subtitles underneath, where I'm just like, man, I wish that they could have gone a different route with that. It's a lot of dialogue to get into, and plus also I get where they could just say, hey man, it's on a streaming thing, so you can just pause right there, read the whole dialogue, hit play again, and keep on going and doing that. But a lot of people just say, hey man, people can be speed readers. I get that. I got most of the dialogue, and so but then eventually we, thank God, have one critter who decides to get a voice box, and then I'm like, oh, great, thank God. Towards the real tail end of the, it's not that all of a sudden somebody has to, eventually learn the critter's language or whatever. We just eventually just have the critter just to go into speaking English, which is great. I think there is a lot of focus on the critters, so much in this on these episodes. So if you liked the critters much more so than the human counterpart of these movies, then maybe this will be for you. I have this, I have a real problem, overall, reviewing this as once we get to real story and just overall approach of the show, because when we get down to it, I'm not exactly won over by the story. We have some points where there's people could be hating on certain parts of here. People could feel cringe about certain episodes and stuff like that. But I also there's some stuff where I can see that these critter things, what they're doing for this show is just having fun. I can see the fun in it. I can see where they're just kind of having fun with these characters again, who are critters, and just kind of having fun with the whole bounty hunter and the critter dynamic. I can see where they can have fun with these characters again and go into this in a different approach. Like, I've seen a bunch of all kinds of goofy movies like Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving 3, which was actually like Thanksgiving 2, but like that movie was those movies were just really goofy. And so like once seeing that, like, and now like seeing stuff like this, I'm just like, okay, like I'll never get anything so goofy as Thanksgiving, but like that'll be like the end all be all, where I can just go into this just going like, okay, like I can very much like I can have fun with this, but also like I can have a combination of different kind of feelings about this. Like I can I can have fun with this, but I can also just say that like it's just a goofy thing where like the story eventually is just like this. That's the story. Like that's the story. Okay, kind of like there are parts in this show that are very much cringeworthy. There are parts that I just think are just too goofy of an attempt for this thing to go into. Um, like this show kind of is just one really long Critters movie because I'll watch the entire thing, and but like I could just say I like the attempt of this, but like there's just like there's some interesting things that it does visually, but besides that, like the story, I just have problems with. Um, Especially when we actually get to the bounty hunter thing. Like I was thinking that we're gonna have a lot. They were like I was thinking like we could probably have fun with the bounty hunters thing, but like of like it's just like there's a lot of kind of back and forth that I have about here where I don't know, like I was kind of wanting them to maybe even quite possibly not have like both the critters and both the bounty hunters just land on Earth so quickly. Like I kind of thought that maybe we could like kind of have like a bounty hunter slash critters like war. Like in the very beginning of this, we could have like some kind of like interesting thing that leads to eventually the critters needing to seek out like their last critters members that are on Earth kind of thing. Um, but here's the thing. Once we actually get to this critter, and it is actually a hybrid critter, let's just say, this hybrid critter, I'm like, I have, I'm just like, there's a cringe moment that I kind of have with this hybrid critter character. Like they do interesting things with the critters. Like all of a sudden there is to be a red critter, where this one red critter is to shoot out this like this little like needle of a thing that is to eventually explode someone's head. I'm like, oh cool. So they're like trying to expand upon some critters or just like try to do something fun. Um, but yeah, but I also like what they do with the hybrid critter. I'm just like really like did we have to see certain scenes of like stuff that I honestly just didn't want to see with the hybrid critter, let's just say, in a very cryptic like sense. Uh but like it also becomes like who are you actually supposed to root for in this show? Is it supposed to be the critters? Is it supposed to be the bounty hunters? Like the human race, like obviously who cares about them, I guess, right? In this thing? Like to where like it starts to eventually seem like a lot of this story eventually just becomes a throwaway at some point, sadly. Uh but I'm just being honest. So but yeah, so with that said, like people can check this out if they want to just to see a more like current attempt at critters. I would say there's some fun parts in here to remind people of the movie franchise. But if you're gonna come in here for maybe a better story than what was originally presented, you might get something out of this. But overall, you might just be like, "Yeah, this was a thing to have watched." Like, so really, people might get to that point of just like, hey, like, I just want to see like everything that involves the critters, and so that just might be you. So with that said, I'm gonna go out of my way to go into spoilers about this episode, and I'll tell you right away who the critter hybrid is in this show right after once we get to spoilers. So plus also if people are thinking that I'm going to be doing like a lead up for every trickle little bit of this episode, I am just going to go in like the roundabout way of this episode, but I'm going to spoil right away like the beginning stuff and just show like people like so if they might be interested or they might not, like I'll just tell people right away some things. So watch this whole episode. I think it's like an hour and 20 minutes if you watch the entire show. So like anyways, I'm gonna go into spoiler time. It's about that time to do spoil critters, a new binge. So who or what is the hybrid critter in this episode? Well, we find out that we have a main character who is to be Christopher, and we end up finding out eventually somewhere within these episodes that Christopher himself is actually the hybrid. We bizarrely have Veronica, uh, Christopher's mother, who I guess is to just bang anything that moves. And coincidentally, Veronica had a Woodstock weed drug whatever beer night with a critter, which led to Veronica giving birth to a baby slash critter hybrid, which didn't really show itself up until like a certain episode because all of a sudden we just have Christopher who's like, well, yeah, like I just have certain things that like seemed like I was human because all of a sudden we have like Christopher who just like takes out his teeth and just like lasers his eyes to all of a sudden have like himself look like a critter. And then all of a sudden we have like Christopher that has back hair that we had to show. And but like I think the goofiest thing is when Christopher eventually has his like cape and like he's going into the food contest like towards the end of this thing where like all of a sudden he has this like midriff that I'm like, why for a character? I didn't want to see that. Like no offense to Joey Morgan. Like there's some stuff that I just didn't want to see of this man during the show. Like obviously. But I think it was just to do like some comedic stuff. Like to me it feels like I don't know exactly what they're going with the Christopher character at points through this show. Like it feels like he was like the awkward kid that kind of gets heckled about his like weight in this show, which I was kind of like, why did they do that? Like really? Because like this guy, like I've seen him in another number of other projects. Like I've seen him in uh, like he recently, I think he did uh that Max Reload movie with Kevin Smith. Like I've seen that. Um, like I've seen that movie, and so like I saw like Christopher in that. So the guy Joey that plays Christopher in this. Anyways, pushing on. So let's talk about this show. So the very beginning of it, we have the critters who are to be talking to their president critter or Mr. President. And so Mr. President is to tell all the critters in critter language because again, I just why didn't we have subtitles? Or why did we have subtitles with this? Uh, Anyways, so they're to mention that they are to look for their lost critters that had, or Krites, because that's the way they always say it in Alien. So they're gonna go find that on Earth, and they are not going to eat anybody. The rule is to not eat anybody, but they break that rule quite easily. And so yeah, like so they go through this and just go and start like deciding, well, F it, we're just gonna like go and just like eat people and kill people anyways. Like these critters are a much more like puppeteerish like act. It's kind of obvious. There's like some spots where you can kind of see where like a woman is getting attacked, and it might feel like a puppetish like thing where like this woman is obviously being a puppet for her own like critter. But no offense to that. Like, hey man, like freaking like I understand like the budget of this show overall, even though it's special effects, but like I can kind of sense like the way that they approach this. And so uh and so what ends up happening is supposedly once the critters are to land on Earth, we eventually have the bounty hunters that are also to be sent to Earth. But here's the severely goofy thing. So the hunters are to land on Earth, but they end up landing in Australia. And so evidently the uh, the place that they are supposed to go is United States, Iowa. And but the bounty hunters crash landed onto Earth on Australia because they were fighting off the critters ship, and so they crash landed onto Australia. And so now the bounty hunters have to quickly run from Australia to United States, Iowa. And supposedly there is a 10,000 mile distance between, like, so, and I'm just like, say what? Like, so are we not even going to get these bounty hunters to show up at all? Or are they going to show up at the very last minute? And I was just kind of like, that sounds fun, but, like, I also would have liked for there to just have been, like immediately when I was thinking of this, I'm like, hopefully uh, there's just some, like, obvious, like, people that have consistently been through this whole Critters run of things that, like we just have one kooky guy that is going to come out of the shadows and just be like, hey, I knew they'd come back. And I technically could say that that happens, but like, so uh so anyways, we have Christopher, who is to eventually consistently be called pork chop by his mother Veronica, and I'm just like, pork chop, really? That's not annoying as many times as you would say it. Plus, also, that just like that isn't the right. Come on, like really, like this is going into like 80s or 70s or whatever, where like you'd have these like goofy names that just don't sound right. So, but yeah, so Christopher is to eventually like go and always be hungry, and it seems like his mother is trying to just kind of give him like a a seemingly just like a thing of like fruit or whatever for his like breakfast to, I guess, slim down Christopher. And so here's an interesting thing. We have Gilbert Godfrey on this show. I'm like, Gilbert Godfrey? Little legendary Gilbert Godfrey? The freaking, like, the most awesome man, freaking Affleck commercials, but like all kinds of other stuff that he had brought in us through time. Freaking the Aladdin show, and like freaking Gilbert Godfrey, like the legend Gilbert Godfrey, whatever. Anyways, so like he's just he's like, I guess he's like Uncle Godfrey or what. I don't know what he actually is in this. Uh, He's just called Uncle. Wow, that's great. An IMDb. Nice job, IMDb. So we just see like Gilbert, who is grabbing these pancakes and putting them in the pocket of his robe, I guess to save it for later for his thing that he is to be like giving food for that we naturally assume is a critter. And so so Christopher is to run off to meet his friend named Charlie, and Charlie had given him a thing of food, and so Christopher is like, "Oh my God, you're a lifesaver." So Charlie is to mention to Christopher, "Hey man, there's a hot dog eating contest, and I think that you would be like, you would take that thing down. You'd be able to just like easily win that whole thing, and like you should be like going and doing that." And I'm like, okay, like there is still this like, scratching of my head, just kind of like, is this offensive? Is this not offensive? I don't know. Am I saying offense that this is offensive? Being offensive? I'm sorry. Like I don't mean to be that way. I'm just questioning whether it feels offensive or not. So but Christopher is like, oh, well, yeah, that's great and all. But I'm going to go on and I'm going to go and talk to this girl named Dana. And, like, I'm going to go see her at her veterinarian place. So, and Charlie's just like, well, hey, man, like, that's great and all, but I don't want to be late. Like, I don't want to be late for school again. Like, it seems like you going over there is going to get us late yet again. So but anyways, like Christopher is like, but man, like Dana, like one day she's probably just gonna see me in the light, and I'm just gonna be like, yeah, Dana, like you're gonna like me now, right? Yeah, that doesn't seem like it's ever gonna happen. It just feels like Christopher is just like it seems like we could like really win. Like it almost like Christopher almost saved Dana's life in this freaking like he went out of his way to like save her life in this show, and even that she's just like, I could care less about Christopher. Like it's just like, yeah, like he kind of saved my life like a bajillion times in the show, but I could care less. But let me pause here to do a little bit of a reset. All right. So once the critters crash land onto Earth, the critters are of course hungry, and so they decide to go to uh, Dana's veterinarian place and go and devour all these pets. And so by the time that both Christopher and Charlie make it to Dana's veterinarian place, we all of a sudden see all these animals that are kind of like weirdly decapitated or whichever. We can't tell whether that these things are hot dogs or liver, but hey, like special effects and like they did a pretty decent job at the whole like parts where they had to mix in like critters and actual people. I thought that those spots were fun. um like yeah, so you just gotta forgive them for some things, even if it just kind of looks cheap. It also, there's some jokes in here that I actually laughed during some spots here. So we have the sheriff and deputy that arrive, and so we all of a sudden have this sheriff, who is to be Sheriff Miller, and Deputy Jackson, that are to come in on this. And so we just bizarrely have this deputy that ends up grabbing this one, obviously like stuffed dog, grabbing it up in the air and saying like, hey, this looks just like my dog, and then he chucks it back onto the ground. And I'm like, what a weird line delivery. But I just couldn't help getting like a chuckle out of that. It was just so weird. So, but what ends up happening is it kind of seems like this sheriff or deputy, in a roundabout way, are just trying to like construe a number of things, or just like trying to not have to figure out who exactly like really did this. They're just trying to like, in a roundabout way, said that maybe like, oh, well, maybe Christopher and Charlie did this, or maybe Dana did it, or maybe like what exactly are you guys doing in this veterinarian place? Like, like it kind of feels like they don't want to go and really do their actual job, but like eventually when they do their job, like it is kind of like goofy or funny the way that they approach this, because it's the normal sheriff or deputy way that they have to be like these goofballs of a characters, just because like really they have to showcase that they're not going to do well doing whatever job that they're doing. So anyways, pushing on. So uh Christopher, Charlie, Dana, like they all head to school. Charlie eventually is to go and sign up for the eating contest, and so that lands us to eventually having a kid who is supposed to be like the jockey guy and is to be kind of a, oh my god, where is he? Where? He's probably not even in IMDb. I hope he is. Ethan? Let's go with Ethan, because I'm not really seeing. Yeah, I'm assuming it's Ethan. So let's go with that. So Ethan is to show up and is to be like the school bully, kind of beating up on Christopher while also winning over like Dana very easily. And like we have where Ethan is to find out that Christopher is to be in this eating contest, and so uh, Ethan is to say it's like, well, yeah, I'm sure like your mom has been able to handle a lot of hot dogs in her day, if you know what I mean, and he like symbolizes that she's doing like blowies and whatever. So uh, both Christopher and Ethan get into a fight, and that all of a sudden is to have us have Principal Weber or Mr. Weber eventually saying like, "Detention, all of you." Not in that very robotic voice. Like I just like detention. Like so we have this very like Breakfast Club moment when these kids are to eventually be put in detention, and like it gets where like Weber is to mention something and Charlie's to have this joke. And so but eventually Charlie is to go or Christopher is to go home and eventually see his mother and some delivery guy named Holtz who are making out, because I guess like Veronica is just like playing fast and loose with all these guys. Like she'll nail anything that like exists. I guess like that just really just doesn't seem quite right. Like it's honest, so like it's true. I'm saying what happens in the show. So all of a sudden we have Christopher kind of like ripping into his mom about like the life choices that she's making, and so like Christopher is just kind of wanting to be so tempted to just go and live with his dad wherever his dad is supposedly to be, because we end up finding out that Christopher's supposed dad was supposed to be some like roadie guy from the WWE, I guess is what this show says. So I'm sure probably Christopher is like, hey, maybe my dad is like a wrestler. Wouldn't that be great? But anyways, so uh, what eventually ends up happening is that the Krites are to, or the critters are to eventually just start going through like parts of town and interrogating people to find out where Veronica is. And so it seems like these people will give the critters information and then eventually will get eaten afterwards. It does get to the point where we eventually have the critters like finding out where this girl works and eventually going through this computer and like finding out her address in a very goofy way, like as if it was like really easy to do, but like hey, like any way to just quickly fastly do story, because like also like give these people breaks, they're freaking puppets and whatever, it's difficult to do anything on stage or screen or whatever, so it's hard, so give them breaks. uh but anyways, so what eventually ends up happening is like the critters are also just still tempted to eat whatever, to where the boss has to like forcibly make them come back to them, like the boss of this whole ship. And so he ends up like putting on this like sonic weapon that causes them to all retreat back. And I think that Chris is to hear that noise as well. And so, because eventually what ends up happening is Christopher is to be grounded once he's to get home. And, but Christopher was to be uh, able to supposedly to be asked to go to this party for reasons I don't quite know why, because when looking at it, both Charlie and Christopher are just the most awkward guys there. And like there is a lot of times that I've been asked to like a party where I'm just like, I don't know how long I really want to be here. Like I am just like, I'm not finding a connection here, to where I just feel like I should have just been home. like uh like but yeah, like a lot of times I would just go with friends and it would just be like, yeah, I am just not feeling the vibe here. I just want to go home. There was some like like birthday party things that I went there and I was like, I want to go home. like, and then like I went to dances and I was like I'll mingle with people, like, but I didn't have the gift of gab then, like I don't even have now. And see, yeah, like it just like you get to find these people and you're like, yeah, this is so cringe, but I've been there. like where Charlie is just trying to like talk to any of these women, and every single one of these women say the most offensive thing to him. And then he's just like, oh, okay, all right, maybe this is my shirt, maybe it's haircut, I don't know. But so eventually, we have Ethan, who is to be making out with someone who wasn't Dana, and like really just pressing on her and feeling her up and all kinds of things. All of a sudden, Christopher is to eventually find Ethan and making out with this girl, and we had the critter who ends up knocking out this girl. And so all of a sudden, there's accusations being thrown around about who roofied this girl, and all of a sudden, we eventually have one of the critters who decides to just jump onto Charlie as he arrives and starts like trying to attack him, but then it does nothing. Like we have like eventually one of these critters that jumps on the back of Ethan and honestly just does nothing. like I was just like, so like they attack, but what do they do? But but yeah, so eventually Charlie is to take a shot, like a video shot of this critter. And so like I was like, oh, okay, so like this is the proof that the critters exist. And but anybody that Charlie is to send this to, no one is to believe them. They're to think like, oh, you made some YouTube video about this weird looking like porcupine of a thing. Like, and funny enough, like we have them call these things out as like porcupines or like bowling balls or like some kind of goofy thing that I kind of thought was funny that maybe at some point somebody used during any point of this, like these hairy balls like, that are rolling around. Like I just thought that that was just kind of funny. Like there were some things that I just thought I was like, you know what, like they're trying. They're trying to do something fun. Like they're trying to just do something different. I liked the one where like the critter comes out of like the laundry thing. Where all of a sudden like the critter like attacks the woman while she's doing her laundry, because I think that was a really cool effect. How they had like the glowing eyes and then all of a sudden the thing came out and attacked her. I thought that was actually pretty cool. I liked that approach. Like I thought that was really fun. Um, there was one spot where a guy was to like get a driver, and so he's like this rich high end guy that's getting this driver, and then all of a sudden we find out that the driver is the critter, and then so the critter goes and attacks the driver. Like I think that was kind of fun. Like there was stuff that I thought was kind of fun that they did here. um but yeah, but it was just like also like story needs to be there. as I sound weird. Uh, so all of a sudden we have like there was one spot where like eventually like of course Christopher was to come home, and eventually he was to get even more trouble with his mother, where like Veronica's like, God, like Christopher, like I grounded you and you're not even like what's wrong with you? Like if anything, I found a number of pizza boxes under your bed. Like what's going on? Like it feels like we're having a like a PTA kind of or whatever kind of moment. One of those uh like one of those like moments where like we need to just sit down and just talk about like kids these days and they're just their blatant disregard for obedience or that they're just lashing out or being rebellious like the more you know like just try to like accept that they just want to have some fun with their life but also they're just probably just going to wind up just the more that you push away the more that you like try to push them in the more they're going to push away and like like I thought we were going to have that kind of moment somewhere in the show but anyways so eventually this all leads to eventually these critters eventually finding Veronica after like they find her address. So eventually the critters go on to attack Veronica's home, and we end up finding out that the delivery guy is actually the Holt is actually a bounty hunter. I'm like, oh, thank God. So there's some saving grace here that there was a bounty hunter that has kind of been here all along. He's been here for the past 3 weeks, and he knows where Veronica was, and so it's like, oh, okay, I can buy into this a little bit, like like because eventually we're gonna get some action here, and that's gonna be great, and so and eventually like the critters go down to the basement and kill Gilbert Godfrey and I was like the legend Gilbert Godfrey, you murder that man, how could you take down this man? That just seems wrong. Like I don't care that he was like there and you had to kind of like squeeze him out because really like he was like critters was seen but what you could have just let him live. Gilbert Godfrey. Anyway, so they also killed an owl in the progress, and so that's when eventually Veronica was to spot, like, yeah, I guess they're back. So Holt is to go and like start killing all these critters, and by that time we find out that uh, Christopher has been having some problems with Dana. That Dana is to have come into that party at the tail end of it to eventually find that some girl was to be roofied. And like Dana is assuming that it could have been Christopher, and but Dana just wants nothing to do with Ethan or Christopher or Charlie or anybody. Like she's just gonna be forever alone, I guess. Like maybe she's gonna date women. Who knows? Like whatever she wants to do with her life. So why did I go into that? I don't know. So eventually this leads into another day of detention where like Dana is like, you know what, I don't want any interest in talking to any of you people. Like this just lands me in detention and like I wasn't even a part of this life and whatever. I wasn't even doing anything. I was just standing around. All of a sudden a fight broke out where I was and now I'm in detention. This is garbage. So all of a sudden we have like Mr. Weber who's like detention, all of you. And so like the last thing that he used to say, like Charlie used to make a joke about it, and Mr. Weber's like, oh, we got jokes. Well, looks like you're gonna be spending another week in detention. And Charlie was like, worth it. Like so we end up finding out that there is to be like Mr. Weber has like gone out maybe for a smoke or something, and all of a sudden he ends up spotting the delivery guy who ends up going into the front of the like school, and so we have Mr. Weber who's like, I'm sorry, deliveries are out in the back, and so we just have Holtz who ends up changing into Mr. Weber, and what ends up happening is like Veronica is in the car with Holtz making their way to the school to help Christopher. And so it ends up that uh, Christopher or Holtz is to supposedly try to figure out a way to come in with a weapon into the school. And Holtz is like, I'm not going to be able to put this laser gun and be able to like bring it into the school. And then all of a sudden they see a box, and I'm like, oh, okay, so he just brings a gun in here, and it's gonna be like freaking Terminator 2 Judgment Day, because it ends up like opening up like that, where it feels just like that same sequence. And we have Holtz, who ends up changing into Mr. Weber, and so Mr. Weber is now like Holtz, so I'm gonna keep calling him Holtz. So Holtz is to eventually make it into the detention room and open up his package that has a gun in it, or what we are to think is to have a gun, and instead it has a golf club. And I ask why, but I guess they just figure that there is some package that has a weapon in here, but it's a golf club. And I guess that's just an easy thing to just fight out these critters. So like it doesn't like they don't have to like blow all these critters up or have this like huge budget of effects that has to like kill off all these critters or whatever. So it doesn't have to like be like a repetitious like blowing up critters moment. So Weber is to all of a sudden have these critters all crashing in. So it's now like Holtz versus critters. So we consistently have this scene where, like, and this happens a lot here, where the critters are to grab onto, like, the shoulder of, like, the person they're attacking from behind. You're going to consistently see that here, where every single time there is to be, like, Holt, who is to get like grabbed from the shoulder to, I guess, like kind of prevent like something from being seen. And so being at like so we have spots where like the critters just be latched onto the character, maybe like they had to like change like outfits or whatever to have this like look good. And so like there's plenty of spots where it's either like the puppet is like there or puppet is not there. And so like it's kind of like I like the way that they approach this, because it feels like very smart how they like did this. Like I enjoy the fact that they kind of went into these battles and they kind of went into it very smart and intelligent. Like I could appreciate these people for doing that. And man, did they probably do a lot of work into these sequences and whatever, and I guess I can applaud them for that. But just the stuff that happens just after this, it's just a little just too goofy for my taste. Because what eventually ends up happening is that Christopher and Veronica eventually do get captured, and they are to have been like knocked out and to be put onto the ship. And so eventually the critters had supposedly like came for what they came for. And so we eventually have the actual critters president eventually show himself, instead of just being in some like screen somewhere. He actually, I guess, teleports himself there. And so now we have the critters president that is to basically tell Christopher, hey, like, I need to tell you the truth, because I guess Veronica never bothered to tell you. Like, you are the critters hybrid. Me and your mother had just boing to boing and bang to banged. And you know, like, we just did it. We, like, me and your mother, like, it was a crazy time, but, like, you know what? We just went for it. And obviously, with this critter who has a severely long tongue, I can maybe understand maybe why Veronica was maybe, you know, thumbs up of the whole thing. So, like, we also had a moment where Veronica and, like, Holtz were in their car, and Holtz was mentioning, like, yeah, like, I was just waiting for 3 weeks to eventually get to the point of like finding when the critters were going to go after Christopher. And Veronica's like, well, yeah, but we had like sex that whole time, and like, did you actually enjoy that, or was that just a job for you? And Holtz was like a lot of times it's just a job, but like that thing that you did with your tongue that one time was out of this world. It's like, so it's just like giving her credit, but like for most of the time, like the guy didn't feel anything. But anyways, so uh, pushing on. Uh, so eventually, like President Critter is to tell like Christopher, yeah, like you're a hybrid, and so all of a sudden, then we like surprisingly get this reveal that all of a sudden, like Christopher's like teeth are falling out, and his eyes are being lasered to now have red eyes, like because supposedly he has like he had to have like corrective teeth being put in, and like his eyes had to be like done a certain way for them to look like everyone else. But then eventually, when they finally like correct the critters, correct that, he has red eyes, and so all of a sudden he has back hair that has like the weapons coming out of his back, and I'm just like, okay, they could have gone without that, but like, but but eventually, like they end up going and uh, like having to like prep him for interspatial flights, so they just keep giving him like needles and stuff that are injected into him. And so we have like Christopher who's acting this asking this doctor, it's like, hey, are you even like accredited? Like, are you sure you should be even be working on me? Like, and so, but yeah, so this is just revealed that this guy is like half critter, half human. And so like now like we have Christopher that is kind of rejecting his human mother and just starting to just like, you know what, I need a minute alone. Like I need a minute alone with just me and my thoughts, and just like to just kind of just like understand all this, like just like understand what all I've kind of been lied to this whole entire time. And like he has to come to grips with him now being a part of this critter's species. So uh like Christopher is to eventually just get a call from Holtz to basically have a gun on both Charlie and Dana. And Holtz is like, yeah, like, because eventually Holtz is to be arrested and to be like sent to the sheriff's like interrogation room, because like after that whole thing with Holtz like killing some critters and also a number of other things, eventually the sheriffs arrest him and take him in. Like I thought Weber was dead at that point, but I guess I was wrong. And then I thought like the other bounty hunters would have just showed up, but no, like this Holtz guy has to be like throughout the whole entire show, which I was okay with. So, because eventually the other bounty hunters find Holtz and rescue him, and Holtz for a temporary time like took the disguise of the sheriff, like to I guess tell us that eventually like we're gonna have times where like the guy is going to keep on like shifting and changing and whatever to eventually be different people. So what eventually ends up happening is like the critters decide to go back because Christopher is like, no, like I'm going to go back to Earth and take down these bounty hunters, and like I'm going to save my friends. And so the critters is just like, okay, all right, like because like we have Christopher who like mentions that this like Altoid is to be some like thing that could end his life. And so the critter is like, the president critter is like, no, don't do it. Like, he's my son. Like, okay, Christopher, like, we'll go back to Earth. Like, we'll help you. And so Christopher spits out the Altoid that he got at the party. So what eventually happens is that so we at the very end of this go on and have Christopher show up at the hot dog eating contest. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that has to be the way that the show has to end, with something that Christopher was like, that they were kind of teasing about throughout this whole show, was the whole hot dog eating contest thing. And so, like, that's how they were to end the show. I'm like, okay. So it seems like the news is there covering this whole thing about the hot dog eating contest, because I guess they don't have a lot of news where they're from. So, uh, well, no, let's not get into that. So, I was gonna say something, but then I was like, no, because I'm like Iowa, but then no, let's not go into that. That's awful. So, anyways, so what ends up happening is that, whew, so Christopher is to show up with this cape on and this clothing midriff where we are to see his belly, which, like, hey, like, we didn't need to see that. Like, come on. Like we also had to have, like, this, like, thing where Christopher had to bizarrely use his, like, bizarrish, like, new critter weapons of, like, and I'm just like, wait a minute, like, couldn't have the critters just done that? Like, they eventually do that, so why didn't the critters just do that moment? Why did we have to have, like, Chris? I get he has his, like, his new powers technically, but that just looked just kind of weird. And they could have just went with just, like, they could have had him completely turn around and, like, have, like, the cape, and they could have covered up a lot more. But anyways, like, they could have just, like, had the critters just do that. But anyway, so the critters just go off and are like, dude, we're gonna eat everybody. Like, and Christopher is like, yeah, because, like, technically, uh like, it's an ends to a means, where, like, Christopher is just like, I want to get my friends and anybody who's going to be in the way of that. So eventually what ends up happening uh is the bounty hunters are to eventually, like, kind of just get taken out and whichever. So eventually Christopher is to go and grab Dana and run off with her to protect her. Uh, but eventually we end up finding out that Dana is actually Holt. And so he ends up, like, coming back and he's like, yeah, like, and he's wearing, like, female clothing, because of course. And so we have, like, Holt and Christopher fighting it out. Like, Holt stabs Christopher in the chest, which again is not a thing that I needed to see. But eventually we have like, Christopher who gets the upper hand on Holt's. And so it just seems like Christopher is just unstoppable, like, that he's never going to die. But Christopher is to eventually realize that the critters are going too far and they're eating everybody. Like, President Critter is to eventually say, like, well, hey, like, since, like, all the bounty hunters are basically to be taken care of, like, we're just gonna have a non-stop eating thing. We're just gonna take everybody out. We're gonna finally wipe out Earth. And so eventually Veronica is all of a sudden, like, take her belt off and just like, yeah, I'm gonna take my belt off. And the president, the Critter's president, is just like, yeah, I know that this would get you hot. Like, yeah, like, world domination, baby. And so all of a sudden we eventually see that Veronica is choking President Critter out and killing him. And so that eventually just has, like, Christopher decide to get the ultimate weapon out, which was used in the early episode, is to just go and turn the device that was to just uh like, stun or to make the critters come back to the leader. Christopher decides that he's going to push that to, like, kill all the critters off. And so the critter who had the device is telling uh, Christopher, it's like, you know what, isn't that stupid? Because that's going to kill you. Like, but Christopher is like, you know what, I got to do it. So, like, I like the one-upsmanship of what they kind of do here to kind of wrangle these critters in. Um, to kind of keep them obedient, but, like, so we have Christopher who uses the device to kill all the critters off, blows them up, whichever. And so what eventually ends up happening is we end up finding out that that Christopher did not die. His ears are bleeding, and so Charlie is to eventually take out Dana like from out of this dumpster and just be like, hey, like she's free again. So Dana goes off to see Christopher, and so now Christopher is like, well, like, can we kiss? And Dana's like, no. Like, if anything, like, hey, he saved her life numerous times during this whole scenario. But like, I think it's always the thing that they don't want to go into kissing or they don't want to do any like relationship stuff because I think that's always the way it is for every one of these movies or shows or whatever. They have to like tease at it, but they never go into it. Or like even if they do go into it, it has to be this kind of like uh whatever kind of PG-ish kind of thing. So, but eventually Dana is just like, well, how about you ask me out first? And Christopher is like, well, Dana, can we go out? And Dana's like, maybe. And like, it's just like, I would have just been like, you know what? Like, I could have just killed you all. I could have been that person. And so, like, Christopher could have just, like, went off with his, like, critter buddies, like, whoever was left, and just could have just been like, you know what? Sayonara. Uh, or yeah, like Christopher could have just went off and just been a bounty hunter, and maybe that would have been fun. But anyways, like Christopher eventually is to uh, like that's just how they kind of play him off. And so what ends up happening is we end up having the critters who have this plan B because while they were doing a bunch of like stuff on Christopher, they were also to take out blood. And so what we end up finding out is what they do is they end up cloning Christopher multiple times. So you just see like multiples of Christopher that is just kind of like I guess he only had like a swimming trunk thing on and or just you see his like top half and I'm just like again, we didn't need to whatever. Like this show is over, so it's just like we didn't need to see all that, man. Like, come on, like whatever. Like, come on, man. Like, freaking, like this is all PG, so we're not gonna see like a woman, like even cleavage. But like, good God, like we could have just like, oh, you know, man. I don't know. But anyways. So, like, that's their plan B, their goofy plan B is to just have Christopher clones. And so, like, did they think that they were, like, I guess they were maybe preparing that, like, hey, man, we could probably do another season. Like, this was, like, really, like we were under budget with this thing. Like, but, like, so, like, there was goofy things that they did with the bounty hunters, but eventually it just became, like, that the bounty hunters were a non existent thing. And like they were just a means to eventually just become a villain technically of this story and all it really mattered was like just the critters and their goofy things but yeah, so with that said, I think that's all that I want to get into, and plus also this is almost like the entire length of the show, so I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.